These are your property investment red flags. So there are a few not so obvious red flags that we go through in property investment, and most of the time you end up finding out after the fact, and it's cost you tens of thousands of pounds. So this should definitely be a video that gives a lot of value. We'll start with location. We've heard it before. Location, location, location. What the hell does that mean? Like, what actually makes a great location? Well, I can tell you what makes a bad one and how you can analyze it from the safety of your own home. Talking about safety, the first thing I always look at is crime rate. So I like using a website called Property Data. It's really good. It's something like £7 a month. We've actually got a link, by the way. We'll put it in the description and you can get it free for 2 weeks. See what you think of it. It's got a load of info on there. If not, and you want to penny pinch a little, which is cool, use streetcheck.co.uk. The data's a little bit out of date, but it gives you a lot of stuff. Back to crime rate. This may shock you. The average amount of crimes across the UK is 75 crimes per 1,000 people, which means 7.5% of people are criminals, which is absolutely insane when you think about it, right? 75. So when you look at this data, you might look at your area and go, oh my God, there's 50 crimes per 1,000 people in this area. That's actually very safe. So anything below 75 people, good. Anything above 75 people, yeah, starting to get sketchy. Everything above 150, just don't go there, all right? And definitely don't buy property there. So what about the areas where it's got suppressed prices? Well, these would be great locations, right? No, I used to think this actually. I once had a portfolio of about 30 properties in the northeast, in the mining villages, and these were properties that were like 50 grand, and you think you cannot possibly go wrong. Well, yes you can. There's a reason they're 50 grand. Now I'm just going to explain the logic. Just so you know, most lenders are setting minimums. I'm talking about mortgage lenders here. They're setting minimum lending amounts, and the reason why is, what's the point signing the paperwork and going through the stress to loan out 20, 30 grand for a bank? Hopefully that makes sense. So a lot of them are about 75 grand. You can get some at 50 grand, and that's lending. So that's how much they will give. So for a 50 grand property, you need to be purchasing at like 67,000 pounds. Anything below that, very hard to get. So with that in mind, think about who is buying a 50,000 pound property. Well, more than likely, they are going to have to buy it cash. So it's going to be an investor that's going to buy very low. They'll rent it out for maybe 400 pounds a month, and they know they're just going to cash flow forever. But those locations, and we'll talk about tenure of property in a moment, are predominantly renters in the area. Why is that, Jamie? Well, think about it logically. If you lived in that area and you managed to save up, I mean, let's even say £40,000, not even the full 50, would you then save up another 10 grand to buy that 50 grand house? Or would you realize, actually, I've saved 40 grand, I've probably got a decent salary to be able to do that. Why don't I move to this nicer area where properties are 120 grand, where I can put down a 10% deposit, refurbish the property, easily afford the monthly payments because it's similar to my rent, and pay for a holiday? It doesn't take much logic to understand why most people live in those areas as renters, not buyers, which means long-term capital growth doesn't exist. Let's go back to tenure of property. What does that even mean? Well, you might not know this, but write this down. Across the UK, 30% of people own their house outright. There's no mortgage on it and they live in the property. 30% of property own the property and live in it, but have a mortgage on it. So in total across the UK, 60% of properties are owner-occupier. 21% are private rental. So people like you, people like me, we buy a house and somebody else makes it their home. And 19% is social housing. So 30%, 30%, 21%, and 19%. Social housing being like government housing, for example, could be somebody on LHA, local housing allowance, or it could be assisted living, for example. But in general, 60% of the market is owner-occupier, 40% is the rental sector made up of 21% private landlords. So that's interesting to know. Not really. What does it actually mean, right? What it basically means is when you're looking at your area, and again, you can find this on Street Check, is the owner-occupier higher or lower than 60% in total? What does it even mean? Well, think logically. If your area is above the 60%, it shows that that area is higher in demand for people to live there and they have the money to purchase. What this means is over the long term, it will likely get higher than the UK average capital growth. Values of properties in those areas statistically will go up more. If it's below 60%, that is below the UK average, which means less people want to live there that can afford to purchase. That doesn't mean property prices go down, but statistically, it's likely that it will be fairly flatlined. So in general, in poorer areas, you will notice the statistics matching. By the way, that doesn't mean 62% is going to make a difference or 58%, but some areas are like 70%, and that is definitely going to drive it. On the other side, in the rental area, what you're really looking for is that social housing demographic. If the social housing is much above the 19%, so 25 to 30%, it's not that they're bad tenants, but there is a stigma around it. So if you're above 30%, for example, you're going to start to struggle to get mortgages in those areas because it's likely to be a bit of a rougher area. Now, hopefully that lands in the right way, but fairly simply, if you go around the area, you will get a feel for the statistics. But it's always good to get objective data rather than, hey, this kind of feels like a good or a shit place. Two final things I look for in an area, and the second one is a nice hack that really increases your odds of profit. So the first one is logistics. What's going on in the area? And I'm talking about the amenities. Is there a hospital within a couple of miles? Look at the Ofsted reports of schools, and that's how the schools are graded. Are they good or outstanding? And every single property I look at, that is one of the key factors, by the way. Does it have a school within 5-10 minutes drive, if you like, that is good or outstanding? If not, it's going to say a lot about the area. Hospitals, fairly obvious what's going there. Driving professionals. Where's the nearest bus stop? Where's the nearest train? Where's the nearest hub for employment? All of those things really matter. And you might think, well, I'm not living there. Why do I care? Well, because your customer is living there. And you want somebody that is likely to be working in close location to jobs in the area, close location to transport in the area in case they don't have a car. And what that's going to increase the odds. Maybe not just your profits, but I want a tenant that's going to make this their home and stay there for 3 to 5 years. Finally, forced capital growth. What does that even mean? Well, capital growth is the value of property going up through time. Now, you've got the natural capital growth, which is basically inflation, which we all know about. But when you own property, by the way, the higher the inflation, the better it is for you when you own it, not before you own it, right? But how do we force that? Well, a lot of it is looking at development plans. And not many people do this, but if you go on your local council website and you look at development plans, you will see what's going on in the area. For example, South Banks of Leeds. The South Bank area of Leeds is historically quite rough. To be honest, if you're local to Leeds, you'll be like, oh, Hare Hills, Beeston, Hunslet, all of those areas, oh, a bit rough around the edges. Until you look online and you see we have the second largest residential development in Europe ever going on right now. Just to give you a perspective of this, that's 350 football pitches. This is a 30-year development plan. A new city is going to be created. New hospitals, cinemas, schools, anything you can think of is going to get developed. Just ask yourself, what do you think is going to happen to the property prices in that area? If you said down, leave the channel. If you said up, it's fairly obviously a place you want to be putting money right now. Location is definitely one of the biggest ones to go over, but that doesn't mean the smaller ones aren't as important. For example, condition of the property. Now, I love a stinky property. If people used to say, if it stinks of we, think of me. And honestly, you'd have this mindset of, I want to go in and make this shithole somebody's home. And the great thing about doing that is you can add value, but does that mean always go for a poor condition property? No. So some top tips on this. If you are going to a house where it's a hoarder's paradise, like there's shit everywhere, you must dramatically overestimate the refurbishment or just walk away from the property unless they're willing to empty it. I've bought a few of these myself and they were all big mistakes because as soon as they take everything out, you see there's windows that were cracked, there's the chimney, there's damp in the corner, structural issues, all of it was hidden because of that. So make sure it's cleared out. Number 2 is damp. Always understand what it is. Is it from a leaky gutter and that's come in? Is it penetrative damp, i.e. it's going through the walls? And people think, quick fix. No, bricks are like a sponge, like literally like a sponge. It's just really slow. So even if you fix the problem, it can take months for that damp to come out with dehumidifiers every single day. Or is it rising damp? Is it coming up through the ground? All of these are really important and people often dramatically underestimate the cost of stripping back, tanking, replastering, and everything that comes to it. Next is electrics. Make sure if it doesn't have an EICR certificate, an electrical certificate, look at the electrical consumer unit. Every single property you view, get a photo of the unit, ideally the serial code, because you're going to need to make sure that is compliant. If the box isn't compliant, likely the electrics aren't compliant, and that could cost you £3,000 to £5,000 on top of what you thought. The same goes for the boiler. Take photos of the boiler. When was it installed? When it was installed, were all of the pipes and radiators done as well? Because again, that's something that can cost thousands if you get it wrong. Finally, with the condition of the property, structural conditions. Now, I'm not bothered if there's a slight crack in the wall. That doesn't bother me. But some quick tips. If I can get my finger through the crack, I'll probably walk away from the property. It's likely to be fairly substantial damage. And even if it's a hairline fracture, if it's going all the way from the ceiling to the floor, that is a big problem. And normally what I do is go outside and look at the pointing between the brickwork. Can you see the same line on the outside? Walk away from that property. And the final thing I want to think about the end before you're at the beginning. And what this means is everyone makes their money thinking about the exit strategy because it implies what you're going to do today. The reason you do this is to de-risk yourself. So for example, if I'm buying a property as a serviced accommodation, and I've seen a few people do this, they buy these absolutely stunning houses to do high-end service accommodation, and the numbers are amazing, and they really are. Massive profit margins. It inflates the value of the property temporarily so they can get their money out. But then it's like, well, what if it doesn't work? What if you had to do that as a HMO? What if you had to do that as a buy-to-let? And I've run some of the numbers on their properties and it's like, whoa, you would be upside down, in the water, some real problems that you're coming across. So when I'm looking at my exit, what if is the thing that I'm asking myself. What if it doesn't work? What if the service accommodation gets trashed by a party and wipes out 3 months' profits? What if I need to change strategy? What if I need to sell the property? Constantly look at the exit because number one, it will de-risk yourself. Number two, it will make sure that you can change direction as you're going through. And number three, it's going to dictate how much you spend on the property to make sure you're not going above the ceiling price of your strategy in that area. So those are the main things I wanted to cover in today's video. But what I'm interested in is what do you look out for the red flags in your area, condition, or anything I've not covered? Let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer as many as possible. And by the way, if you've got money to invest in property and you're terrified of missing one of these red flags and maybe you want somebody else to do it for you, that's what we actually do. So we help people build their portfolios. We find the property, negotiate it, get it through the legals, refurb it, and manage the lettings in-house. And if you want us to do that for you, put APG in the comments, and what we'll do is we'll book in a free one-to-one strategy session to make sure it's for you. If you got value from this video, make sure to hit the like button. Of course, if you're new to the channel, you want to find out more about property, make sure to hit the subscribe and the notification bell, and we'll see you in the next video.